Hello and welcome to another episode of With Enough Prep Time. I'm your host, the Nerd Man, and today we're talking about Superman and Lois, and what has amounted to my favorite episode, and also at the same time the most problematic episode I saw. Now, full disclosure, I've talked about on this channel a lot of the things going on in the DCU with certain people coming out with allegations against, people like uh, Jeff Johns and other showrunners, like the showrunners of Superman and Lois. They recently were accused of having certain racial insensitivities in the writing room. And I came out and, I think there's a thing with people of color, black people sometimes that we do, and we really ought to be mindful of it, where we're like telling, certain successful black people, black people in the industry, we're like, oh, keep quiet. If there's something going on, just stay quiet, so maybe if you stay quiet, they'll leave us alone. And I, I don't look. I'm by nature a very, very diplomatic person. So often when I hear some of the accusations that are made about these programs, I'm like, please give detail. Let me understand where you're coming from, so that it doesn't just seem very trivial and like things that you ought to, as an adult by now, be able to deal with in a manner that doesn't need to escalate into, oh, we all hate each other, right? Some people often don't know that they're being racist. Sometimes they just, they're being a little bit ignorant, and because of their ignorance, it seems as if that they're actually like very, very, like they're being really, really insensitive about being black. Now, there's two ways you can handle that. You can have a discussion, or you can just be like, I am not taking this anymore, and I'm going to be just angry and shun that person. And I think too often what's happening to these days, and this is what I'm really, really against, is that instead of black people taking those people who may do something racially insensitive out of ignorance and taking them aside and actually talking to them, the new attitude is just like, we're not taking it, and this person has forever become a racist asshole because they did something that was racially insensitive. And I think that's a problem. I think that's not a way to build bridges and try and find ways forward. And I don't think that does good for black people in these industries, where people will be scared to hire them because they're like, oh well, or people of color for that matter, or women even, because they'll be scared to hire them because they're like, oh no, what if I do something insensitive out of ignorance, and then they put me on Twitter and put me on blast and call me a racist and a this and a that and a so forth. But I want to give some props today to Nadria Tucker, who in a previous video I actually did kind of chastise a little, and I read up on the details of her complaints. I was particularly kind of, I was particularly belligerent towards her, suggesting that the Kents should be made black because she was worried that too many of the villains in the Superman in Superman and Lois were black, and that there weren't any kind of heroic characters that were black. And then I kind of watched the show, and in watching the show, I noticed that Lex Luthor was who she was talking about, and I thought, well, this is actually a well-developed character. Lex Luthor is usually a kind of sophisticated genius, so him being a villain isn't so problematic. But there is a problematic villain who I believe this is who he's talking about as the other black person in the show. And it's what I wanted to get down to as to why I felt really enjoyed the show, but at the same time it was very problematic, was this young man who's actually a very, very good actor. He's very talented. And he was in the show. I had it open, literally had it open, and now it's not there. Okay, so we're gonna have to go in again and open. But I'll go into the queue just after talking about this. But this young man, Fritz Kleven's Destiny. He's basically been in it for 3 episodes. He plays in this, in this episode and throughout the series, he's played this kind of bully who's in a relationship with Lana Lang's daughter. Now, one thing I'll note about this, the 2 things that really struck me as kind of problematic about this guy's depiction in the show. Now, I'm going to give the show the benefit of the doubt and imagine that they weren't looking for somebody black when they were casting this role. They just put out an opening casting and, found that this guy was the best person for this particular role because he was just really, a really good actor, and he was the scariest or the most, intimidating when he did his audition. However, there's 2 problematic issues with him being in this role. One is that he's playing a bully that is a one-dimensional bully who is a complete stereotype of a violent, angry black person who, his girlfriend was kissed in the first episode, and he's so unreasonable that he can't, just look past that and continues to attack this young, vulnerable white boy. Now, this image of this kind of bully being associated with blackness is very, very problematic. The second thing is you have a relationship, which is a mixed relationship, once on a CW show between an actual black male and a white woman, because usually they like to do these mixed kind of relationships, something that Nadria herself picks up on. They like to do these mixed relationships, but it's usually a white man with a Asian or black or or Indian or woman. You never see it the other way around. You never see films or shows or any of these things where it's an Indian man maybe dating a white woman, right? And having some kind of healthy relationship, or a black man having a healthy relationship. It's always the other way around, and especially on the CW shows and in superhero movies and stories very recently. That's always the dynamic. It's race bending, a certain character like the Flash's girlfriend. She's race bent, Iris West, and she has a healthy race relationship with this nice white man, treats her lovely, and does all these things. And then for once we actually have it the other way around. Now, I think Nadria Tucker also brought up that in Supergirl that Jimmy Olsen was supposed to be going out with Supergirl, and they changed that halfway through because they were like, oh, we don't know how people are gonna kind of look at it, so they gave her a nice alien white boyfriend instead. So again, they're very uncomfortable with showing mixed relationships from the other way around, where it's a black male and a white woman. But added to that, or any other ethnicity and a white woman, because white women are obviously so too good for any other race to. But apart from that, when they do seem to show these relationships, and they'll never show any intimacy between the black male and the white woman, or the Indian male and the white woman, or whoever, Asian male and white woman, they'll never show any kind of intimacy between them. But apart from that, um, they decide to show this relationship, and it's an unhealthy relationship. It's a relationship in which he's possessive, he's a bully, he's aggressive, he's it's a really really problematic vision. And I have no problem with black people taking on any roles, right? And this comes down to, look, there's films and media that I like where people are cast, or they play certain roles, and I still can enjoy, I can separate myself from my problem, that particular issue I have with that show or film, and say, despite that, it's actually quite a good show. Now, for instance, American History X, has is a great film, right? And the only problem I have with it was its depiction of the young black male who's a bully who ends up, sorry, spoilers for American History X. Anyone who hasn't watched it, it's a great film, go and watch it. But there's a black boy in it who's bullying a kid who is part of a white supremacist group. And this black kid ends up shooting this kid at the end of the film. And the one problem I have with this film is, despite having a very, very good message and a very interesting kind of message, again, exploration of the reasons for something like white supremacy, or for somebody to become a white supremacist, they don't pay the due and enough attention to give black people the same benefit of the doubt. Like, if you're going to show a bully that is a black guy, let's go in depth. Let's find out about this person. Let's find out why they're a bully. And then you might be able to see that, okay, there are other elements creating the outward persona that make it more complicated, the situation. That this person wasn't just born a bully because of their social status or their intelligence level, or something like that. That this person has become a bully because of their environment and what's been happening to them at home internally. And I think this should be true of all depictions of bullies, really, in whether they're white, black, Asian, or whatever, but particularly with black because of the stereotype there. But in general, there's this image of the bully that they're bullies because they lack intelligence, and they're jealous, or they're and obviously because it's nerds who write these stories, that's probably why the bullies are so usually one-dimensional. But there is not a person on this planet, bully or otherwise, that doesn't have a story to tell that produces the individual that you see before you. Rarely do people do wrong just out of pure malice. There's usually some kind of issue running behind that wrong. So if you're going to depict a bully like this, let's find out why he's a bully. And what I'm particularly peeved by in this show, which is an otherwise good show, Superman and Lois, is that this guy, is in the show for only 3 episodes. So we are not going to see this black character or actor, Sean Smith, in the show anymore. Um, you know, he's been in it for 3 episodes, and he disappears. So basically, the end of it is, so it starts off with Clark's son Jonathan ends up kissing his girlfriend. Clark's son Jonathan ends up kissing his girlfriend, um, and the bully, you know, up through, and then was only through because Clark's son Jonathan Jordan, pardon me, now has powers, that he that he basically now has powers, so that he's now strong enough to go on the football team, play on the football team, and actually overpower this black kid. So the only way that he can get this black kid off his back, because after he's done that, he tells the black kid, sorry, or Sean, sorry, and that he shouldn't have kissed his girlfriend, and he helps him up, and kind of puts out a hand of reason to this bully after beating him, as I said, in a show of strength on the football pitch. Now, that's the end of this kid's story, Sean, right? 3 episodes. He gets to be an angry, malicious, horrible, bullying stereotype. And then, Jordan kind of is the reasonable person and squashes the beef. And then, this kid is gone from the show. That is really bad. That's really, really bad representation. And, if you're going to have the kid in there, you're going to make him a bully. I said, look, I'm looking out for this. Let me see what happens with this character. Maybe he'll develop. Maybe he'll turn into a kind of Pete Ross style figure for Jordan. Maybe they'll make up organically. Some people start off as enemies and end up friends. And I just think this is appalling. And I'm starting to see what Nadria Tucker was saying about how this show in places is problematic. I still think for the most part it's enjoyable. It's not, oh, I must switch it off. It's that terrible. And I still do think that listening to this interview and listening to parts of this interview with Nadria, where she describes her experiences with Jeff Johns, I do think there's a little too much sensitivity. There's a little too much intolerance, because you can't beat intolerance with intolerance, and that's the problem. Becoming prejudiced towards the prejudice is a non-starter. I don't mean to go all Martin Luther King on everyone. If somebody's coming and attacking you and being violent towards you, you're damn straight. You go back up, and if it's because of racism or because of whatever reason, you stand back up and you fight back. You punch back, you hit back. But in general, for the more innocuous forms of racism that happen on an everyday basis, I think it's a much better approach to reach out a hand of, tolerance towards those who show signs of intolerance. It's much better to show a hand of non-prejudice towards those who harbor prejudice. I think it's the only way forward. And so where I agree now, I'm listening to Nadria Tucker. She describes, events that happened with Jeff Johns, in which he said some bullshit to me. And then after saying some bullshit to me, one day we were having a discussion because one of the black actresses kept changing her haircut. And Jeff Johns said she can't change her haircut, like, for everything. And Nadria was saying, no, it's okay, because, this is a black thing. Black women usually change their hair. Now, of course, these women are Kryptonian. because it was on the show Krypton. But we'll forget about that for a second and just say, okay, he's talking about black women. And apparently, he, when she told him this about black women, which personally I have to tell you, I didn't even know, and it was enlightening to me. When she told him this, he said, no, that isn't a black thing, right? And from that, she decided to never talk to Jeff Johns again. And I just think the intolerance with the intolerance, he's not going to learn anything. You're not going to learn anything. And it goes nowhere, it's like being racist against racist people, right? It's like that's not the way. That is not the way forward, and I think that's important to say. I really do. Sorry. I think I'm going to retitle this because this isn't even a Superman and Lois review, really. It's just a kind of discussion of where I think it went really, really problematic this week, and where I kind of do agree with Nadria Tucker that the presentation of this black person in this episode was particularly problematic to me. I don't like to see in a situation, especially in America right now, where young black males are basically under attack in certain situations, where it's actually cost them their lives or they've been brutalized because they're seen as aggressors. They're seen, and imagined to be aggressive. And this is a problem. We can't have this continue because we're not, and black people are not like this. If you're going to do it, give some dimensions to the character. Give them a real role. Give them a redemption story. Explain why. Show that this is not just a characteristic that is innate to this person because of one reason or another. That's what I'm saying about this particular character in this particular episode. It does not make Superman and Lois as a show racist completely. Now, I understand that the showrunner, Tom, by the way, he was a showrunner, I think Todd Helbing, also had some kind of issues where he said to Nadria that there were no people of color in Canada, which is, obviously patently false. And I'm sure there's lots of black actors in Canada. Now, what she was doing, discussing casting, I don't know, since she's a writer. But he said, I finally understood because it was said that he said, we'll get some black people in, even if we have to ship them into Canada, where the show is being shot. But hearing Nadria relay the story again, I kind of understand that this was, like the tone. Sometimes it's about tonality, and when you hear something as opposed to reading it, you really get a context for what she actually meant. Now, she mentioned Ray Fisher. Now, I've talked about Ray Fisher, and, I encourage Ray Fisher to watch this interview. Now, it was Lady Genevieve, who I have a lot of respect for. She's a Snyder fan, and she always asks great questions. Now, I don't think she was as hard-hitting with this interview as she could have been, and I implore all of you to watch this interview because it's an interesting interview, and see what she has to say, and see how credible you think she is, because watching this, I find her a lot more credible. I still think she's far too sensitive, and this approach of anger, frustration, meeting people who, as I said, are ignorant, meeting them with blunt force as opposed to education and teaching and a hand out to better kind of understand the situation of whether it be black people or whatever. Now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of resistance to that as well, which bothers me. We talk. I've just watched this royal family interview recently with Meghan Markle, and we go out there and we say what happens, and we're met with a lot of resistance about whether we did whether this was racism or not. Somebody asking, oh, I wonder if your baby's going to be black. Think about that. Would you say that if you had a blue-eyed person and a green-eyed person? Oh, I wonder if your baby is going to come out with blue eyes. You wouldn't say that to that situation. Then you have to wonder why somebody would say that to a woman who's biracial in a royal family. Again, I don't think it's that big a deal. I would have dealt with that diplomatically and said, I don't know what the baby's color is going to be, but why do you think that matters to you? And I would have had the conversation rather than be just offended and, fix nothing and solve nothing. The conversation is always better to have. Always reach out a hand. And if they reject that hand and they're resistant to that hand, which they often are, then there's nothing you can do about it. There's nothing better you could have done about it. And if it is so aggressive and so egregious and so, unbearable, that you feel completely defeated and saddened by this in a professional workplace, of course, you ought to, relay it to HR and, do your best to ensure that the environment of your workplace becomes a better space for you to work. And I agree with that. The only thing I disagree with, and I've always disagreed with, and this includes Ray Fisher and it includes Nadria Tucker, is putting people on blast on Twitter with very, very vague statements, which, on the face of things, especially with Ray Fisher, not so much with Nadria, now that I've looked into her more, I think she's much more credible than Ray Fisher. But on the face of things, with Ray Fisher, he's made a lot of statements of things that people have said that aren't even racist. That you have to be incredibly apparently Jeff Johns said to him, play cyborg like Quasimodo. Now, maybe if you add the tone and the way it was said to him, but apparently this was written as a note to him. So again, he says he got incredibly problematic notes like play cyborg like Quasimodo. Well, Quasimodo is within the remit of things that you could say, yeah, you could play cyborg like him, and that would make sense. But in any case, I don't want to go off into Ray Fisher territory again. What I'm trying to say is that with this show and with this woman getting fired, I think it is deeply kind of problematic now, looking at her interview, hearing her out, and realizing, look, I've been a little bit too vigilant. I think her association with Ray Fisher kind of prejudiced me towards what she was saying and what her problem was. And her problem, I think is relevant now looking at it. And I'd like to hear more about her experiences. And, even just down to apparently black actresses and black, people or talent, on camera talent, not having their own hairdressers, not having their own makeup artists because the makeup artists don't, aren't used to their skin tone, their complexion, their hair, and then but nobody's hired like to be a hairdresser for black people in films. It's crazy. And that leads to various issues that need to be sorted out. Really, I don't. That is racist hiring, I suppose. But I'm saying that this all creates a kind of environment where tensions are always going to rise, and that needs to be sorted out. But in general, about the comments that were made to her and about the things that have been said to her, I feel a little bit of millennial Generation Z hostility and intolerance towards the intolerant. And I just I think with a little less sensitivity and a bit more kind of openness to actually discuss with people who don't just share the exact same opinions as you, you might end up being able to change your reality a little bit more than is happening at the moment. I think too much people are just listening to people who echo exactly what they have to say, and I think that in itself is what's causing a lot of issues. Anyway, that's me talking about Nadria Tucker. I thought it was my duty that I had to, given what I'd been saying about her recently. So, yeah, I hope you enjoyed this candid discussion about what I saw as problematic in Superman and Lois episode 3, and about Nadria Tucker. And I'll see you on the flip side. Love you 3000.